स्थापकाय च धर्मस्य सर्वधर्मस्वरूपिणे अवतारवरिष्ठाय Ramakrishna te namaha. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the study of the life of household, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Austerity is the source of strength and also the means to liberation. So, translated into English, it becomes tapasya. That is austerity. So, austerity is the source of strength and also the means to liberation, says the Hindu scriptures. The gods attain Godhead by practicing austerities. You know that the students get good marks by austerity. What is that? They give up all the entertainments, sleep, food, and they concentrate on studies. So that is a type of austerity. So they get good marks. So even the students to study and get promoted, they need austerity. The people working in the office for earning money, they need austerity. A businessman needs austerity. Everybody, even gods. The gods attain Godhead by practicing austerity, tapasya. The sages achieve perfection through austerity. Human beings overcome obstacles and attain success in life by the power of austerity. Tapasya, spiritual life, and the practice of austerity always go together. It would be hard to believe that a person has realized God without having practiced austerities and spiritual disciplines. Yogin Ma, Yogindra Mohini Biswas, a disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Yogin Ma. Her life is a glowing example of the ancient Indian ideal of womanhood and austerity. So we are studying different characters which are prominent in the life of the householder disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. And what is prominent here in the life of Yoginma has been discussed. So Yoginma's life is a glowing example of the ancient Indian ideal of womanhood and austerity. She combined in her personality great poise and sweetness with a spirit of service and rare spiritual wisdom. She was one of Sri Ramakrishna's prominent woman disciples. Once Sri Ramakrishna said about her, she is a gopi perfected by God's grace. You know who is gopi? The woman of Vraja in Vrindavan, Mathura, that area, during the period of Krishna. So the women folk were called gopis and the men folks were called Gopa. Gopa Gopi. So those people who lived in Vrindavan and Braja during the time of Lord Krishna, Krishna birth was in Mathura and from there he was shifted to Vrindavan. So he stayed there. So those people who were staying with Krishna, The Brajavasis, they are called Gopa and Gopis. So Gopi is a woman who lived with Krishna, who served Krishna, who had great devotion to Krishna, who practiced, the ladies of Braja, they practiced Madhura Bhava. Lord Krishna, from his childhood up to the age of 10. So in the 11th year, he had left Vrindavan and never came back. So they knew, all the gopis knew that it was Lord Vishnu who had taken the form of Lord Krishna and was staying in the midst. So all those ladies who had that Madhura Bhava and who worshipped Krishna with different attitudes, not all of them worshipped in the Madhura Bhava, some had different attitudes too. So all of those people who lived with Krishna, the women, they are called gopis. So here, Sri Ramakrishna said about Yoginma that she was a gopi perfected by God's grace. So she had reached the perfection. That was Gopi in her last birth. She was the Gopi. She was the incarnation of one of the gopis. Just like Ramakrishna had told that the best friend of Krishna. So he was born this time as Rakhal, Swami Brahmananda, playmate of Krishna. Likewise, now Yoginma, Ramakrishna is telling that she is a gopi perfected by God's grace. Her full name was Yogendra Mohini Mitra, or Yoginma for short. She was born on January 16th, 1851 at Bagh Bazar in northern Calcutta. Her family's home was very close to that of Balarama Basu, a householder disciple of Sri Ramakrishna. Prasanna Kumara Mitra, Yoginma's father, was a well-known physician and specialist in midwifery. Besides his regular practice, he also lectured at the Calcutta Medical College on that subject. Prasanna was quite wealthy and owned a large house with a garden, on one side of which there was a Shiva temple. Yoginma was his second, Prasanna's second daughter by his second marriage. When Yoginma was 7, she was married to Ambika Charana Biswas. In those days, child marriage was common. So she was married at the age of 7 to Ambika Charana Biswas, who was an adopted son of a rich and prominent family of Kardah, a village 12 miles north of Calcutta. The Biswas family was noted for its piety and philanthropy, and some of its members were well versed in tantric rites, that is, the worship of Divine Mother, the people who adopt or they worship God as Divine Mother in particular way, they adopt this system of Tantra to worship Divine Mother. They are called Shaktas. So they were well versed in tantric rites. One of their ancestors, Prana Krishna Vishwas, had compiled the Pranatoshini Tantra, a famous treatise on Tantra scriptures. Like many wealthy families, the Biswas family wanted to become renowned by building a shrine containing 100,000 Salagrama Shilas, sacred stone emblems of Lord Vishnu. Their their undertaking was not successful. However, for they were able to collect only 80,000 salagrama. Damodara, that is Lord Krishna, was their family deity. We all know that Lord Krishna's name, he got the name Damodara because when he was a small child, he was so mischievous, he would be running here and there. Mother Yashoda, to punish him or to contain him, had to tie his waist with the rope and then tied that rope to the pounding machine, the stone, not machine, it was in those days the mortar in which the paddy would be pounded. It's a big stone like structure in which they put the paddy and pound, wrestling machine. So now that will be quite heavy, and Krishna pulled that stone mortar so easily, though he was a very small child, and that got stuck up between two trees. And he was the Lord, and when he pulled, the tree broke and fell, and in that tree lived the cursed demigods, and they got liberation from that state. They were cursed to become the tree. So Lord Krishna gave them emancipation in that way. So because his waist or the stomach, Dhamasya udaraha yasya saha. So whose stomach, Dhama, is rope, Udara is stomach, whose stomach or the waist portion was tied by the rope by Mother Yashoda. So such Lord Krishna is called Damodara. So now Damodara was the family deity of Prasanna, that is the father of Yoginma. Yoginma's parents were very happy that their daughter had been married into a pious and wealthy family. Although child marriage was then the custom of society, Yoginma did not go to live with her husband at the time of their marriage. Only after she had grown up did she go with great hope and expectation to Kardha to join Ambika Charana. But to her dismay, she very soon discovered that this rich young man was a drunkard and libertine. Although Ambika Charana had inherited much property and wealth from his father, he squandered it in a very short time. He was so extravagant that one day he asked a servant to light the tobacco in his hubble bubble with 500 rupee notes in bills. So now, if that was the way he used to spend money, with so much of egoism, extravagant, so even the richest person will become a poor man quickly. So now, he soon became virtually a beggar. Yoginma lived with him for a few years and tried in vain to change his life. She bore him one daughter named Ganu and a son who lived only 6 months. But patience has its limits. Disgusted with her husband's immoral life, she at last severed her relationship with him and returned to her parental home, bringing with her their daughter. By then, Yoginma's father had died, but her mother welcomed them warmly. When Ganu, the daughter of Yoginma, grew up, Yoginma arranged her marriage. The romantic picture of a peaceful, happy married life had been shattered, and Yoginma felt a great void in her mind. Tormented by anxiety and restlessness, she agonized over how she would spend the rest of her life. Just when she was passing through this mental storm, divine grace opened up a new life for her. In 1882, Yoginma met Sri Ramakrishna for the first time at Balarama Basu's house. So, when everything was slipping away, when everything was gloomy, when she was undergoing so much of suffering, tormented by that anxiety and restlessness, she agonized over how she could spend the rest of her life. But when she was passing through this mental storm, now divine grace opened up a new life for her in the form of Sri Ramakrishna. As Yoginma has said in her memoirs, Balaram Basu was related to me, being my husband's maternal uncle. One day, Sri Ramakrishna came to his house and we went to see him. It was the first time I saw him. The master was standing at one side of the hall in deep samadhi, the highest state of yoga, immersed in the Parabrahman, God. So Ramakrishna was standing on one side of the hall in deep samadhi, reminiscences Yoginma. Ramakrishna had no outer consciousness. Since no one dared to touch him, people bowed down to him from a distance. We also did the same. At that time, I had no idea what samadhi was. I at first, I at first thought that he was a drunken devotee of Mother Kali. I could not understand the master at my first meeting. Moreover, it immediately came to my mind that my married life had been ruined by a drunkard husband. And again, should I undergo my spiritual life through the influence of this seemingly drunken person? But gradually, I became acquainted with Sri Ramakrishna, and all that wrong negative thoughts vanished. It's interesting to note that Yoginma's grandmother, her mother's mother, had met Sri Ramakrishna at Dakshineshwar probably in the late 1870s. At that time, Keshav Chandra Sen was writing about Sri Ramakrishna in his newspaper and magazines and had made the Calcutta people aware of this great personality. Yoginma's grandmother read about Sri Ramakrishna in the newspaper and went to Dakshineshwar to meet him. Strangely enough, on arriving there, the first person she encountered was Sri Ramakrishna himself. She did not know who he was, since there was nothing unusual about him. He didn't wear any orange cloth or some trishul or a danda or put on the religious marks or long hair or anything, no rudrakshamala. It was so simple. So she couldn't recognize. She did not know who he was, since there was nothing unusual about Sri Ramakrishna's dress or appearance. Addressing the master, she asked, "Can you tell me where Ramakrishna Paramahamsa is and how I can see him?" The master replied, "What do I know about him? Some people call him Paramahamsa, some people call him young priest, and some others call him Gadadhara Chatterjee. Please ask someone else to help you find him." Unfortunately, Yoginma's grandmother did not press the matter further, thinking that perhaps Sri Ramakrishna was not so important after all. She lost interest. She walked around the temple garden for a while and then returned home. Balaram Babu would often go to Dakshineshwar by boat and would invite other devotees to go along with him. Yoginma went with him a few times and then she started to visit Sri Ramakrishna with some other devotees. In her memoirs, she said, "Gradually, I began to feel an attraction for Sri Ramakrishna. Just the thought of visiting him would make my mind dance with joy. On the day that I planned to go there, I would get up early and finish my household duties as quickly as possible. My longing to see my longing to see him knew no bounds. After arriving at his room, I would forget everything, sitting in his presence. The master used to experience samadhi off and on, and at that time we would look at his face with wonder. Sri Ramakrishna was so compassionate. Whenever I bought him some ordinary preparations, he would relish them like a young boy, saying joyfully, very tasty, delicious. And always at the time of our departure, he would say, come back again, Abareshu. Those words of come back again were so special. Then that person who heard it couldn't remain quiet in his house. His mind would become restless, pulled towards Sri Ramakrishna until he comes back and sees him. When I returned home, Yoginma is recollecting, when I returned home after my visit with the master, I would spend the whole week in an intoxicated mood. Just the presence going to Sri Ramakrishna would fill my heart with so much of joy that in the house, when I returned home after visiting Sri Ramakrishna, I would spend the whole week in an intoxicated mood, God intoxicated. My mind would be very high. This established a strong relationship. I cannot express the joy I felt even while I was engaged in cooking or other household activities. So, just a few minutes with Sri Ramakrishna, she would experience this. After coming back to her house, that intoxication of meeting and the joy out of the satsanga of Sri Ramakrishna would be so high. So, Yoginma is telling, I cannot express the joy I felt even while I was engaged in cooking and in other household activities. Yoginma is telling, my mind was with the master. After some days, when I would feel my intoxication diminishing, my mind would again long to see him. Yoginma had been initiated into a Devi mantram. So already Yoginma was initiated into the Divine Mother's mantra, a name of the Divine Mother by her husband's family guru. And she used to repeat it twice daily. So she used to do that mantra japa daily twice, morning and evening. When Sri Ramakrishna heard about it, Sri Ramakrishna confirmed her mantra and told her to continue repeating it. Then he said to her, look, your chosen deity is in this place, pointing to his body, his own body. We all know that though Ramakrishna was the avatar of Vishnu himself, so in this avatara as a human being, he had obliterated his ego completely, and it was the Divine Mother Kali who was living in his body. So Vishnu, Kali, Durga, Shiva, they are not separate, they are the same consciousness. We call it by different name. So now Ramakrishna is telling that the mantra given by your guru is correct. You are doing the right thing, do it. He confirmed it, and then he told, your Ishtadevata, the Divine Mother, look, your chosen deity is in this place. Here in this place means showing his own, pointing to his body. Then he used to tell, see, this is a wonderful advice for all the initiated disciples of Ramakrishna order and also devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. We should note this. What is that? If you think of me, Sri Ramakrishna is telling, if you think of me, if you meditate on me, that will bring recollectedness of your chosen deity. So just think of me. Ramakrishna is telling about himself, think of me, and it will bring recollectedness of your chosen deity. Later, whenever Yoginma sat for meditation, she would feel the master's presence. Sri Ramakrishna also taught her how to practice japa. We all know japa is repeating the name of the Lord or the mantra which is given to us again and again. That's called japa. Showing how the four fingers of the right hand must be kept tightly together. Now, while we are doing the japa with hands, when the quiet counting is being done, we all have learned from Ramakrishna himself. Our gurus also teach us. So some things are told by Ramakrishna himself. We have read and heard from him. And now Ramakrishna is repeating that. And what is that? While we are doing the japa, the hand should be not opened like this. It should be covered. It should have no space. So if the space while you are doing the japa, if it opens up, Ramakrishna used to tell, the result of your doing the japa will slip away between the fingers. It should be always closed like this, kept together. So it should not become like this. So that was what Sri Ramakrishna used to tell about how to count the name of the Lord, do the japa on the finger. The result of the japa goes away, said the master, if there is any gap between the fingers. So note it while we are doing the japa. You should not release your fingers like this. It should be like this. Do not tightly grip it. Okay, normal. So now the thought comes, why? What is the scientific basis? What is the significance behind it? Simply because we open our hands, can the result of the japa flow away? We are doing it in the mind. How can that result be flowing away from the space of the fingers? You just note it while you are thinking, while you are doing some work. When your mind is going away somewhere, it is not concentrated. Then what happens? See, your hands, your legs, or your parts of the body, they get twisted, or it may turn towards one hand, or it becomes loosened, slackened. Why? Because the concentration is not there, your mind is running away here and there. So you can see the fingers open up like this. So if the fingers are not consciously held together, that means your mind is running away here and there. So if your mind while doing the japa or meditation is running away here and there, so naturally doesn't it mean that the result of the japa will go away in between the fingers? That means your fingers, opening up the finger is indication that your mind is running here and there, so the control, the mindfulness is gone, and so the automatically the fingers open up. So that's why without concentration, without focus, so the result will be less. So here it is indicative that we should be always conscious of taking the name of the Lord and concentrate our mind, focus our mind on the deity. The result of the japam goes away, said Sri Ramakrishna, if there is any gap between the fingers. Another time, Sri Ramakrishna said, in this Kali Yuga, so when the Kali Yuga, we know that our Indian calendar They divide it in a big way. Thousands of years together, they form the yuga. So the first yuga in the beginning of the creation, it is cyclic. Indian time is cyclic. The first yuga is Satya Yuga or Kruta Yuga. It is. It goes on for thousands of years. Then after that comes the next yuga is after the Kruta Yuga, Treta Yuga, in which Sri Ramachandra had incarnated. After Treta Yuga, then comes the next yuga is Dwapara Yuga. So, in which Krishna was born at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, Lord Krishna was born, incarnated. So, when Krishna gave up his body, passed away, then started the Kali Yuga, the end of Dwapara Yuga and beginning of Kali Yuga. That is the beginning of Kali Yuga. So, where the righteousness stands on only one foot, suppose righteousness is compared to a cow. So in the Krita Yuga, in the Satya Yuga, the cow of righteousness stood on all four legs. In the Treta Yuga, the cow stood only on the three legs, righteousness, the cow of righteousness. In the Dwapara Yuga, the cow of righteousness stood on two legs. But in the Kali Yuga, the cow of righteousness stands on one leg now. That means the followers of righteousness, dharma, are reduced. More of other activities, dharma is reduced. So that's why it is given in a symbolical way, comparing the righteousness as the cow. So it stands on one leg. Dharma stands on one leg. That is Kali Yuga. So the death of when Krishna gave up his life, then started Kali Yuga. So this is the way in which in the Indian calendar the yugas are divided. So Ramakrishna is telling another teaching is in this Kali Yuga, a Gopala mantra, a name of baby Krishna, or a Kali mantra, mantra of the Divine Mother Kali, produces quick results. So Ramakrishna used to tell in this Kali Yuga, the Gopala mantra, name of baby Krishna, and Kali mantra, Divine Mother Kali, produces quick results. So these were the two teachings which our Yogin Ma had heard from Ramakrishna, and she is giving it here. So Ramakrishna taught her how to practice japa, showing how the four fingers, the four, at four you are when you're holding. In one of the fingers, the thumb you'll be counting. So all the other four fingers should be held together. It should not wriggle out. So the four fingers of the right hand must be kept tightly together. The result of japa goes away with the ma. If you do not keep it closed, if it opens up, said Sri Ramakrishna. If there is any gap between the fingers. Another time Sri Ramakrishna said, in this Kali Yuga, Gopala mantra, name of baby Krishna, or a Kali mantra, Divine Mother Kali, produces quick results. After some time, Yogin Ma also met Holy Mother Sharda Devi, the spouse of Sri Ramakrishna. And the two were immediately drawn to one another. They were about the same age. Holy Mother Sharda Devi once said, Yogin is my Jaya, an attendant of Goddess Durga. My friend, companion, and attendant. Yogin Ma described her relationship with Holy Mother Sharda Devi at Dakshineshwar. Whenever I went there, Sharda Devi would take me into her confidence. She would tell me all about her life, any secrets, and seek my counsel. So Holy Mother Sharda Devi used to ask for my counsel. She used to confide all her secrets with me. I used to visit Dakshineshwar, said Yoginma, every 7 or 8 days, sometimes spending the night there with Sharda Devi in the Nahabat. Then Holy Mother would not let me sleep anywhere else, but would ask me to sleep there in Nahabat with her. Sometimes, after my first visit, Holy Mother Sharda Devi left for her country home, that is Jairambati. I stood on the bank of Ganga and watched her departure, waiting until the boat was no longer visible. After that, I returned to Nahabat and wept bitterly. That was the attachment of Yogin Ma to Holy Mother Sharda Devi. The master, on his way back from the Panchavati, noticed me crying for Holy Mother Sharda Devi. And after returning to his room, he sent for me. Her leaving caused a great deal of pain for you, he said tenderly. He then began to console me by recounting the marvelous spiritual experiences Sri Ramakrishna had had during his days of tantric sadhana. When Holy Mother Sharda Devi returned after about a year and a half, Ramakrishna told Sharda Devi, that girl, Yogin, with nice large eyes, who comes here frequently, loves you very much. She wept a lot at the Nahabat when you left for home. Sharda Devi replied, yes, I know her very well. Her name is Yogin. Whenever Yogin Ma came to Dakshineshwar, she would serve Sri Ramakrishna and also Sharda Devi. Sharda Devi was so fond of the way that Yogin Ma braided her hair that she would not undo it at all. So Yogin Ma would take so much of care to braid the hair of Holy Mother, comb it, oil it, and braid it. So Holy Mother Sharda Devi liked it so much, she used to do so nicely that she would not undo it at all. Even at the time of taking her bath, she would not undo that braid, but would wait for Yogin Ma to come again so that she could rebraid it. Holy Mother Sharda Devi was extremely shy and would not visit or talk to Sri Ramakrishna publicly. One day she said to Yogin Ma, all of you have attained Bhava Samadhi, but nothing has happened to me. Would you tell Sri Ramakrishna about it? So Sharda Devi is telling this thing to Yogin Ma to go and tell Sri Ramakrishna. All the other people who come here, they have attained this higher state of Bhava Samadhi. And I don't have any Samadhi and other things. So ask Master that I too should attain that. One day Sharda Devi said to Yogin Ma, all of you have attained Bhava Samadhi, but nothing has happened to me. Would you tell Master about it? Yogin Ma did as she was told. But when Sri Ramakrishna heard what she had to say, he remained silent. Yogin Ma returned to Holy Mother and she was surprised to find that Sharda Devi was seated on her asana prayer carpet performing worship. She was in an ecstatic mood. She had attained Bhava Samadhi. One moment she was laughing, another moment she was crying, and again another moment she was sitting motionless. So, not that Holy Mother had to get it from Ramakrishna, but she was the giver, she is the Divine Mother. It is just a trice, a wish of herself. If she wants anything, she could have it. That was Holy Mother Sharda Devi. Ramakrishna knew it. So he was surprised. Yoginma went and told that utterance of Sharda Devi to Ramakrishna. But Sri Ramakrishna heard what she had to say. He remained silent. Yoginma returned back to Holy Mother Sharda Devi, and she found Sharda Devi seated on her asana prayer carpet performing worship. She was in ecstatic mood. One moment she was laughing, another moment she was crying, and another moment she was sitting motionless. Yoginma was surprised to see her in ecstasy. When Sharda Devi came down to the normal plane of consciousness, Yoginma asked her, Mother, you complained that you do not experience samadhi, but what is all this? Sharda Devi smiled. Yoginma's association with the God intoxicated lives of Sri Ramakrishna and Sharda Devi created a spiritual hunger in Yoginma's mind. She now diverted most of her energy to spiritual pursuits, spending the greater part of her day in worship, study, japa, and meditation. Although Sri Ramakrishna discouraged her from reading too many books, he did suggest that she study the devotional scriptures. She had had very little education when she was young, but she now began to study every afternoon one of the main Puranas, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata. Ramakrishna never discouraged to study the scriptural books, but the other things he used to tell that would confuse your mind and take away your mind from God. So Ramakrishna would encourage her to read scriptures, the Puranas, the Bhagavad Gita, and such other books, not to read other books. So that you have to note. Although Sri Ramakrishna discouraged her from reading too many books, but he would suggest that she study the devotional scriptures. Now, Yoginma had little education when she was young, but now she began to study every afternoon one of the main Puranas, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Bhagavad Gita, some tantric scriptures, or the life of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Many aspirants do not know that spiritual discontentment is often a good sign. Now, in the worldly sense, in the worldly life, we are discontented when we do not get something, or when the people whom we love are separated. We get the discontentment. We have lost something, we have lost some people, we are far away some people, so we get discontented. That's very bad in the worldly sense. But in the sense of spirituality, divine discontentment is very good. If you turn that discontentment towards God, that will liberate you. So now you can see that this discontent, the spiritual discontent, had been aroused in Yoginma. Many aspirants do not know that spiritual discontent is often a good sign. What does that indicate? It indicates that the soul is longing for more and more spiritual experiences. Once Yoginma was passing through a dry period and decided to complain about it to Sri Ramakrishna. She left for Dakshineshwar. All the spiritual aspirants have to undergo this dry period in spiritual life. You lose faith in God. Whatever you do, you don't get joy. You don't get taste while doing the japa, puja, or anything. So everything looks mechanical. So every spiritual aspirant has to go through that. So in Christianity, especially the Catholic saints used to call this as the dark night. So everybody has to face, every spiritual aspirant has to face. Now Yogin Ma also got it. So no taste for the name of the God. Everything was insipid. So once Yogin Ma was passing through a dry period and decided to complain about it to Sri Ramakrishna. She left for Dakshineshwar on foot very early in the morning, but as soon as she saw Sri Ramakrishna, even just the presence of Sri Ramakrishna, she forgot everything. After a little while, she went to the garden, picked some flowers, and carried them in the corner of her cloth. Sri Ramakrishna was at that time standing on the northern veranda of his room and saw Yoginma coming with something. Sri Ramakrishna asked her, "What are you carrying?" Yoginma showed him the flowers and then bowed down and offered them at his feet. Immediately, Sri Ramakrishna went into ecstatic mood and blessed her, touching his feet to her head. So once Yoginma said, several times I noticed that whenever a question arose in my mind, someone else would ask Sri Ramakrishna the same question and my question would be answered. Thus, in answering that person's question, Sri Ramakrishna would remove the doubts in my mind also. So, by which I came to know that Sri Ramakrishna was all knowing. He could rouse that same question in others, and even without my asking, he could give that answer to me. So, Sri Yoginma now came to know that Ramakrishna was all knowing, Sarvagna. He knew everything of everybody. Yoginma one day brought her aged mother and her daughter to Sri Ramakrishna. They were both very happy to hear his inspiring words. Through Yoginma's influence, her husband Ambikacharan also began trying to change his way of life and to associate with holy people. On November 15, 1852, Balaram Babu brought Ambikacharan to his house to meet Sri Ramakrishna and to be blessed by him. But the master knew how he had ill treated his wife, and after Ambikacharan had left, he said, "He is an unfortunate wretch. A householder has his duties to discharge. He has his debts to pay, his debts to the God, his debts to these ancestors, Devaruna, Rishiruna, his debt to the rishis, and his debt to his wife and children. If a wife is chaste, then her husband should support her. He should also bring up their children until they are of age. They stand on their own feet. So the husband has to provide for all of them. That's his duty. These are all the debts which the householder has to complete." Yoginma did not give up, however. She persuaded her husband to associate with Sri Ramakrishna. So the husband of Yoginma met Sri Ramakrishna again, this time at Dakshineshwar. This meeting seemed to make a deep impression on the husband of Yoginma. Unfortunately, not long after this, Ambikacharan was bitten by a dog and he became bedridden with a fever. When Sri Ramakrishna heard about it, he told Yoginma to take care of him. He said that as a wife, she has a duty towards her husband, even if he had been immoral. Accordingly, Yoginma brought her husband to her parental home during his last days and carefully nursed him until his death. Now, We shall again note it, it's very, very important. Everyone, especially the householders. Now, when he was bitten by the dog and he fell sick, Sri Ramakrishna heard about it and told Yoginma to take care of him. He said that as a wife, here, note it, we have to always, we are all the followers of Sri Ramakrishna. The teachings of Ramakrishna for householders are very, very important. We have to write it down, keep it in one place. He said that as a wife, she had a duty towards her husband, even if he had been immoral. Ramakrishna is telling Yoginma that as a wife, she had a duty towards her husband, even if the husband has been immoral. Accordingly, Yoginma brought her husband to her parental home during his last days and carefully nursed him until his death. Pleased with Yoginma's devotion, Sri Ramakrishna visited her home on July 28, 1885, along with a few devotees. Some musicians had come there and singing they entertained with the bhajans in her parlor. And then Sri Ramakrishna was asked to go to Yoginma's room in the inner apartment for some refreshment. Golapma, Yoginma's neighbor, said to Sri Ramakrishna, Ganu's mother, that is Yoginma, requests you to bless the room with the dust of your feet. Then the room will be turned into Varanasi. If you step inside the room, then because of your presence, because of your foot dust, that room itself will become Kashi or Varanasi. And anyone dying in it will have no trouble here afterwards. That was the faith of Yoginma and Gaurima, that Sri Ramakrishna was none other than Lord Shiva. So then the room will be turned into Varanasi, and anyone dying in it will have no trouble there afterwards. In his reminiscences, Swami Akhandananda described an interesting incident that occurred that day at Yoginma's house. And what is that interesting incident? Let us go through it. Once, Sri Ramakrishna went to Yoginma's house at Nebu Bagan, Bagh Bazar. Hiralal, a brother of Yoginma's, he did not like the fact that Yoginma, his sister, went to Dakshineshwar. We heard, now Swami Akhandananda is telling, we heard that when Yoginma invited Sri Ramakrishna to her house, Hiralal was jealous and was angry, and he did not like that Yoginma, his sister, would always go to Sri Ramakrishna. What did he do? Because he was jealous and angry on Ramakrishna, he bought a famous gymnast, wrestler, called a rowdy of that time, of that area, the rowdy sheeter or rowdy, the bully of that area. He was a gymnast and a wrestler. His name was Manmatha. So now the ruffians, the rowdies, if you pay them money and ask to beat up somebody, they will do it. They want just money. So here was one Manmatha, was a gymnast, was a wrestler, very strong, very tall person, and he was the rowdy and the ruffian of that area. So this Hiralal hired him. He gave him money. That Manmatha, who lived in Gosainpara. So he told him, after giving him money, to frighten Sri Ramakrishna, to threaten Sri Ramakrishna. After, now Manmatha came there to threaten and frighten Sri Ramakrishna. After Manmatha saw Sri Ramakrishna and heard a few words from him, immediately that ruffian Manmatha, the rowdy, the gymnast, the wrestler. Just by seeing Sri Ramakrishna, he had come there to beat him or to threaten him. But on the contrary, the moment he saw Ramakrishna and heard his few words, what happened? By hearing just few words of Sri Ramakrishna and seeing him, that ruffian, that rowdy, that gymnast, the wrestler, he fell at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna and said to him, weeping, started weeping when he saw Sri Ramakrishna. He fell at his feet, caught hold of his feet and started crying, weeping and telling, my Lord, I am guilty. My Lord, he started appealing piteously to Sri Ramakrishna. My Lord, I am guilty. Please forgive me. The master replied out of compassion, even the rowdies, the ruffians. Ramakrishna has come down to this earth not only for the good, even to save the bad, the sinners, the unworthy. Also, Ramakrishna has come to save even them. So when he fell at the feet of Sri Ramakrishna and asked for forgiveness, my Lord, I am guilty, please forgive me. Sri Ramakrishna, with infinite compassion, replied, all right. Come one day to Dakshineshwar. According to Swami Akhandananda, a direct disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, after that, Manmata was a ruffian and an expert fighter who would participate in the street fighting and hit and beat other ruffians. Some days later, Manmata asked Swami Akhandananda to accompany him to Dakshineshwar to see Sri Ramakrishna. When Manmata came to Dakshineshwar and met Sri Ramakrishna, Sri Ramakrishna blessed Manmatha, the ruffian, the rowdy, touching his body. And that touch of Sri Ramakrishna transformed the ruffian or the rowdy completely. In the middle of 1885, Yoginma and a few other women devotees went by boat with Sri Ramakrishna to attend a Vaishnava festival at Panihati, a few miles north of Calcutta. They watched Sri Ramakrishna as he sang and danced among the huge crowd. A few days later, they again enjoyed Sri Ramakrishna's holy company during the Jagannatha car festival at Balaram Babu's house. Sri Ramakrishna spent that night at Balaram Babu's house. And the next morning, he returned to Dakshineshwar. Before he left, the woman devotee saluted him and bade him farewell. But Yoginma, feeling an irresistible attraction for Sri Ramakrishna, unknowingly, without even her conscience, she followed Sri Ramakrishna. Seeing her behind him, the master said in an ecstatic mode, blissful mother, and Sri Ramakrishna saluted her. Yoginma bowed down to him. Then the master said to her, why don't you come to Dakshineshwar, O mother, O blissful mother, why don't you come with me? While master went to the boat that had been hired for him, Yoginma hurried back to Balaram Babu's house and informed Balaram Babu's wife that she was going to Dakshineshwar with Sri Ramakrishna. Another woman asked to accompany her, and they both ran through the streets so they could reach the boat before it left. On the way to Dakshineshwar, Yoginma said to Sri Ramakrishna, Master, I want to call on God more and more and put my mind wholly, totally on God. But it is very hard to control the mind. What shall I do, Master? Sri Ramakrishna replied in a sweet voice, why don't you surrender to him, mother? Be like a cast off leaf in a gale. Do you know what it is like? A cast of leaf lies on the ground and flies away as the wind carries it. Similarly, one should depend upon God. Let the mind move as the power of the divine consciousness moves it. That is all. Let the mind move as the power of the divine consciousness moves it. That is all. Now, Ramakrishna has given us one of the facets of surrender. What is that? Because we are all spiritual aspirant, we should know this aspect of self-surrender, Sharanagati. Yesterday, that is in the last class, in the life of Ramachandra Datta, we came to know that how Ramachandra Datta completely surrendered himself to the Lord. Now here, Ramakrishna himself is telling Yoginma when she asks the question. It's a very pertinent question. All of us have this same question. And now, as if Yoginma has asked for all of us. Now in the boat, on the way to Dakshineshwar, Yoginma said to Sri Ramakrishna, Master, I want to call on God more and more and put my mind wholly on Him. But it is hard to control the mind. What shall I do, Master? Sri Ramakrishna replied in a sweet voice, Blissful Mother, why don't you surrender to Him? So now he is telling to surrender to the Lord. So, what is surrender? What is that special aspect of surrender which Sri Ramakrishna is telling? Let us watch it. Why don't you surrender to God? Be like a cast off leaf in a storm or a gale. When the gale or the wind is blowing fast, the cast off leaf, do you know what it is like? A cast off leaf lies on the ground and flies away as the wind carries it. Similarly, one should totally depend upon God. Let the mind move as the power of the divine consciousness moves it. That is all. You do not worry. Do not judge your progress. Just surrender to the Lord and allow whatever Lord has to do with your mind, with your body, and everything. That is surrender. Whatever might come, favorable, unfavorable, good or bad, accept everything as the prasada of God and be happy, contented with whatever God keeps you. Go on doing the sadhana, praying to Him. Whatever He keeps, let the mind move as the power of divine consciousness moves it. That's all. So while the conversation was going on like this in the boat reached Dakshineshwar. Yoginma and her companion went to the Nahabat to see Holy Mother Sharda Devi. And the master went to bow down to Divine Mother in the temple. Each time Sri Ramakrishna would go out, he used to go to the temple, devote to the Divine Mother Kali, Bhuvaneshwari Devi, sorry, the Dakshineshwar, Mother Kali. He used to go and bow down to her. And wherever he had gone out, he will come back again. He used to go there and bow down to her and talk to her. So that was the habit of Sri Ramakrishna. So we have to follow Sri Ramakrishna. Otherwise, why does the Avatar Purusha need all those things? He doesn't need. He carries Divine Mother always in his heart. But it is to show to all of us what are we supposed to do. Wherever and whenever we go out, we have to bow down to the Lord, pray to the Lord. And then whenever we come back, we have to pray to the Lord, bow down to the Lord. That's why Ramakrishna is showing us. So as soon as he reached Dakshineshwar, now Ramakrishna, after returning to his room, after bowing down to the Divine Mother in the temple, he returned back to his room. He learned from Holy Mother Sharda Devi that there were no vegetables for their meals. The master asked Yoginma and the other woman, could you go to the market? They immediately agreed. At that time in India, aristocratic women did not go out for shopping. If they went anywhere, they would be carried in a palanquin or driven in a carriage, their faces covered by a veil. But because Sri Ramakrishna had asked them, they walked to the market and bought some vegetables, which Holy Mother cooked for the master and the devotees. In the evening, Yoginma and her companions returned home on foot. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, a person cannot be perfect as long he is subjected to shame, hatred, and fear. A person cannot become perfect or reach God or realize God until he gives up shame, lajja, hatred, dvesha, and fear, bhaya. So these three are impediments. Shame. If you have this shame, lajja, you will not go forward. You will be always hiding within. So while you are going on the path of God, you should not have shame. Then you cannot reach God. Then hatred. That is also the greatest impediment because God exists in every living being. If you develop hatred, then it doesn't allow you to go towards God. Fear, another great danger. Fear. So be fearless while you approach God. These are the three impediments. If you give them up, then it's very easy to go to God. So Ramakrishna used to say, a person cannot be perfect or realize God as long as he is subjected to shame, hatred, and fear. In this way, Sri Ramakrishna freed his women devotees from such feelings only for the sake of God. These things can be done. You can give up all these things only for the sake of God when it comes to realizing God. So Ramakrishna, as a guru, as a Ishtadaiva, as the avatar, is training his disciples, especially here the women disciples, to give up these three things while going towards God. Because naturally, by nature, women are prone to shame, this dvesha, hatred, and fear. So Ramakrishna is training them by these even small incidences. Ramakrishna is training them to give them up for the sake of God. You have to give them up, ready to do anything. That's why you can remember the statement of Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. What is that? Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tva sarvapapebhyo mokshayishyami parth. So Arjuna is telling, when it comes to the Lord, O Arjuna, for me, give up all your duties. There are so many rules and regulations, so many righteousness, so many things are given in the scriptures. So I have to do this, I have to do this. But when it comes to God, give up all those things for me, for my sake. So I will protect you. I will protect you from all the sins. Aham tva sarvapapebhyo moksheshyam. So I will give you liberation because everything is in my hand. When it comes to the Lord, sarva dharman parityajya, give up only God. So everything you surrender to the Lord and God will take care of everything. So that's how Ramakrishna is teaching by smaller things to his devotees, especially the women devotees, how to go near God, how to get perfection, how to realize God by simple things, for such things, for the sake of God. All your aristocracy, all the other things, you have to give it up for the sake of the service of the God. So now we'll stop our conversation in studying the life of this wonderful woman devotee, Yoginma, and we'll continue in the next class. Until then, we will go on meditating and thinking and studying and making notes about that portion of the life we have read about Yoginma. Now, we will conclude today's meeting with a prayer. Om Priyatam Pundarikakshaha सर्वयज्ञेश्वरो हरिः तस्मिन् तुष्टे जगत्तुष्टं प्रीणिते प्रीणितं जगत् Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Thank you. Namaste. Om Namo Narayanaya.